Good morning to you. This is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic. We're going to have a little bit of a fun episode today, fun in the way of exposing some rather absurdity in our politics. And really what we're going to be talking again, I'll just get a screenshot up here. This is where we're headed. We want to just get to a little bit of background first. This is where we're headed. The White House has a survey out on Americans living abroad. And this is something that Keith, our great guest, Keith Redmond, pointed out to us and welcome aboard. I want to welcome aboard Keith Redmond, the advocate too, and consulate for the American abroad. Keith, can you tell me a little bit about what got you so upset earlier this week?
Well, I was going back and forth on this survey, okay? And I was thinking, okay, is it worth filling out? Is it not worth filling out? But I actually went through it myself. And I realized that, how do I put this? I'll just have to be blunt about it. I do not understand what this has to do with Americans overseas whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there are a couple questions like, what country do you live in? Okay, I get that. But then at the end of the day, when you go through it, you get to a point where it asks you about the issues that are important to you, and everything that's listed, with the exception of one, tax. Everything else are homeland American issues that have nothing to do with Americans overseas. There's other questions like, what state is your ID from? Well, a lot of Americans overseas don't have a state ID because they live overseas. It's things like that. So I'm thinking and then after all those homeland American choices, then the survey ends. And says
that's right. Yeah, it just ends. Yeah, and we're
wait a minute. Where are the things about taxation or about FATCA? Who put together this survey? I know you guys will talk about maybe the legalities of it, but I'm focused on what is the bloody purpose of this survey aside from a data grab.
I think you just answered it. I think you answered it, and we're going to go through. We're going to go this.
I just want to say, this could have been done a hell of a lot better. It really could.
I think it's going to be. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see, it's pretty transparent what they're doing. And there were some great commenters on Kathy Moore. She commented on your group with some real insight to what the survey, the platform that the survey is on, and we'll get into that. So before we're going to run through this survey, we'll go through it, and you'll see for yourself just how utterly obnoxious this is. It truly is obnoxious. If you are a person overseas, or even if you're a person in the U.S. who's complaining about this awful tax system that the U.S. imposes, these onerous things that truly ruin your life, and you're looking for help, filling out this survey is one of the most humiliating things you could possibly do for yourself. It's really, because you hit next and you're expecting like, okay, when's the survey going to start? That's the thing. You'll see. So before we get to that, I want to sort of build up exactly to the problem that we have going on. And I'm going to turn the discussion now to the great John Richardson. John is joining us this morning from beautiful Toronto, Canada. It looks like his bookshelf is in Toronto, Canada. So I assume John is as well. Good morning, John. And I think that John created some slides today that I think is a great setup to really the issue. And the issue that we have is what, John? What's the issue that we have going on here?
Well, it's right there in the title.
Yeah.
Things are really desperate for a lot of people. For years, I thought the problem was, and it still is to a degree, to engage with the U.S. government, et cetera. But before that, the bigger problem now, very, very clearly, is a lack of unanimity among Americans abroad, and a vast majority of them, really not even willing to commit to the cause of solving the problem altogether.
Right.
So, those who want the problem solved, the time has come to renounce. I think that there is, I think because of the basic impediment caused by the lack of unanimity among the people who are identified as American. I think that those in the minority have got to get out, plain and simple. But we'll go through why this is.
Well, let's go through it. Yeah, so let's go through. Let's get right into it. Okay, so.
I'm not I mean, everybody knows Noam Chomsky. I don't know that I'm a fan particularly or not, but it's hard to not be aware of him. But one of the most interesting quotes that I've ever seen come from him was this, and it says the smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very little debate within that.
Yeah.
And the real struggle at this point, 2025 is going to be a significant year of tax reform, and this is the time that this stuff, needs to get into the discussion. Is what's really being discussed, and there's two competing views here, and they overlap to some degree, but they're fundamentally very, very different. Group one are the people who I don't mean. These are two groups. I'll call them A and B instead of one or two. Okay, but Group A would be the people who say enough is enough. We've got to get rid of this problem once and for all. The only possible way to do that is to sever citizenship completely from tax residency. That's it. So we end at least, things like the transition tax which was unintentional, could not possibly, arose only because of twinning citizenship and tax residency. Group two are the people who really aren't particularly, they'd be happy, I think, if citizenship were severed from tax residency, but they don't think that's the goal. They think the goal is to improve the situation, to essentially improve the conditions of the prison of citizenship taxation.
Yeah.
Various ways. So, that's what's going on. And, the problem is that the loudest voices are the various groups, and the groups are not going to commit, okay, with the exception of, C, and RO, are not willing to commit to the goal of severing citizenship from tax residency. And let's continue on. You'll see why this is a huge problem.
All right, great. And by the way, Keith was just telling me before the podcast that because he wants to support, Keith is in support of severing citizenship from taxation. Keith wants to do that. What were you called for wanting that, Keith? What was the adjective given to you? Because you agree with the Republican overseas proposal of severing citizenship from taxation. What are you down for that?
I was called a right-wing extremist.
Right. And that's
because it was associated with a Republican proposal, or because
correct.
The notion of U.S. citizens being free of taxation is extremism?
Because
or both.
Because I was supporting the Republicans' overseas proposal, I was called a right-wing extremist, and for people who know me, would laugh.
Trust me. Keith and I have had a lot of disagreements about other things. So that is what he told me that I did laugh a bit, because that's not necessarily
what a right-wing extremist is.
Well, right. Well, it's just the way, again,
it's labels.
Right. So the labels used to divide us. That's what it's about.
Well, that's right. And on that point, Anthony, I think it's important to articulate the obvious here and to keep saying it, that the issues that unite Americans abroad are far greater than the issues that divide them. I'll say it again.
I know.
The issues that unite Americans abroad are far greater than the issues that divide them. Okay, there's no question about it. But, the thing you were called there, Keith, this is an example of, Alan Bloom, the great political philosopher, wrote a book, I think, in the 80s called The Closing of the American Mind. I think if he were alive and writing a sequel, he might write something about the American mind is closed and shut, and is there any way to ever pry it open again? That's such an unbelievably stupid comment. But, that's what we would expect. But continuing. All right. Now, here's how, this thing is unfolding, so that all it's talked about is improving the prison rather than getting rid of the sentence, right? And there's at least three ways. The first is watering down the urgency. And this happens by including taxation in a broad sense as one of the many issues of interest to Americans abroad. And that's exactly what this Whitehouse survey is, right? To sort of list it as one of a bunch of things, to diminish its importance. You put 7 things on a list, Okay, I mean, that doesn't tell you anything about relative importance. And what it does always is it waters down. I mean, test it this way. Let's say that,
Yeah.
that you've got a very important issue that you need to discuss with somebody. And, you say, this is important. We really got to talk about this issue. And they say to you, okay, here are the 5 things we're going to discuss today, and we'll put this as number 2. Okay. I mean, obviously, that's a severe diminishment of what's going on. Now, the second thing that causes the problem is analyzing tax reform for Americans abroad under an assumption of the continuation of the principle of citizenship taxation, focusing on symptoms and not on causes. This is stuff like, and by the way, I'm trying to be objective in my discussion. I appreciate all efforts of all people that are, aimed to try to solve this problem, right? But I've got to say that, things that talk about, that create carve outs for some and not for others, or focus on just improving the foreign and income exclusion are really beside the point, right?
Yeah.
And then for individual Americans abroad, their greatest error is to imagine that these groups have, really do have a primary goal of tax reform. They don't. I mean, they may to some degree, but it's one of many things. Okay, they are not generally, single issue types of groups. I'm talking mostly about these legacy groups here. So anybody who sits around saying, well, Group A has got our back, not a chance. Okay,
Yeah.
chance. Okay, moving on. Again, okay, the reason for the confusion, and this is complicated, okay, but here's how you can tell if somebody's really trying to solve the problem or improve the prison. Solving a problem means focusing on who is subject to taxation, period, tax residency. Who is subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code. As long as citizens are included, you've got citizenship taxation, no matter what or how those people are taxed on, right? So listen for removing people from the tax jurisdiction, the who, and not on the what, which is how do we improve the prison? Let's get rid of guilty for Americans abroad, or let's reform
Yeah.
the civic rules, or same country exemption. All this total bullshit. Okay,
Making the prison, improving the
actually
prison.
has the effect of reinforcing the foundation of citizenship taxation. That's the interesting thing about it, right?
Yep.
Continuing
Oh,
on,
here's your right.
great example. You don't
Yep.
need to play the video, but I've been doing a series of short videos with Republicans overseas. Yes, Republicans overseas, everybody. They're on the right side of the issue.
They are. They are. Sorry.
And they are the only group that regards this as a moral issue, interestingly. Okay.
Huh.
But that said, this is a short video I did with Jim Gossard about the transition tax. Now, the reason I put this up here is because that transition tax, as horrible as it was clearly an unintended consequence of citizenship taxation. Not only were Americans abroad not discussed, but they were completely oblivious to their existence. And this is what happens unless citizenship is completely severed from tax residency. Make no mistake about it. And that's why that needs to be the goal. Okay. No, you could have done any of a number of these things that these groups are proposing, and that would not have protected people from this type of problem. Moving on. Now, we've talked about 50 shades of this, 50 shades of that. It occurred to me last night we have 50 shades of American abroadness, right? And their attitudes towards citizenship taxation.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go through these, relatively quickly, but let me explain. And my goal in this is to demonstrate to you that it is ridiculous to think that even a majority of Americans abroad are committed to solving this problem. And here's why. Now, remember, I'm going to define American abroad as a person who's a U.S. citizen who primarily lives outside the United States. Okay, keep it fairly broad. Now, let's go through these different groups, and they overlap, right? This is why I say 50 shades. But anyway, here we go. First group. And they're not a monolith, okay? And they definitely have competing interests. And you'll see, go to the next slide, how the interests of retirees abroad are
I'm right.
opposed to immigrants, right?
Right.
Now, let's see who these people are. They work in the USA until retirement, all US income sources. They move out of the USA for whatever reason, usually because they can't afford to live there.
Yep.
Um, they may not even have a non-US bank account, but if they do, they can keep it below 10,000, easily insulate
Easily,
themselves from F-bar issues. They may be able to avoid tax residency in other countries, either because they don't meet the conditions, or here's a podcast we ought to do: how American citizens can use a tax treaty tiebreak to avoid tax residency in some of these countries.
Oh, I would love that for the next one.
Let's
Okay.
do that next one, in fact.
All right.
Okay.
Great. Wonderful. Yeah, that'd be great.
Now, they obviously file taxes because they've always filed taxes, but their tax returns are absolutely identical to what they filed their full lives. Maybe they have an 8938 if they,
I know.
something like that, but it's fundamentally the same. Now, they don't have an interest in changing. They're not interested in this, but they are fearful that if somehow they became non-resident aliens, that they would be taxed more punitively on their U.S. source income. So you can expect, once the discussion heats up, that this group will be opposing change. Okay,
And this is, and I would say this is actually a pretty well organized group to a degree. And I would say, unfortunately,
very well
this
organized.
is AARP, right?
Very well organized. Okay,
Yeah, that's the problem we have.
they're your enemy. Okay,
Yeah, they're the right. Yeah, they're really, and it's like, and it is something. What's the big deal about taxes overseas? We see this, and really, they file a U.S. tax return, and there's really nothing, to indicate that there's
So,
really anything special about it. Go ahead, Keith.
the way to think about them, Anthony, is they're Americans on permanent vacation outside.
Yeah.
That's how you think about them, okay?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and that's what I was saying. The lightest shade of being an American overseas is just on vacation. Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, I have a question for both of you gentlemen. So this group of this population that's opposed, are they needlessly opposed? Meaning that should RBT come into play, there will be
Yeah,
a mechanism.
absolutely. They're needlessly opposed because no matter what the proposal is, there's going to have to be some. I mean, there's no automatic severance of tax residency. Okay, people will have to do something. And by the way, I mean, there are plenty of green card holders who are covered expatriates, just to give you an example, who will move permanently outside the United States and just keep filing U.S. taxes to not sever tax residency and avoid the exit tax, right? Okay, so I mean, you have to do something. Okay, I don't think even the Democrats are at the point yet where they're going to be, sending people outside the United States to hunt down people who aren't really living in America. They may get there, but we're not there yet.
You're not there yet. Yeah.
Sorry, move up one.
Did I go up? I didn't.
Yeah, we missed.
Oh, I skipped too far. I went too far.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I call these people and think of them as homelanders abroad. They tend to be people who are employed. They tend to be people who see themselves as outside the U.S. on a short-term basis. They tend to be people whose financial center of gravity is in the United States. They think in terms of returning, and they vary somewhat, right, depending on what country they live in, what treaty there is. But by and large, their lives aren't being destroyed by this precisely because their financial center of gravity tends to be in the United States. These are the people who, are likely to be card-carrying members of DA, et cetera, right? In other words, they identify as being Americans, right? And they really, they vary tremendously how long they've been away. But the key point is that most of them, they moved from the United States as adults, probably with decent financial and tax planning beforehand. Okay, some of them, may be on mobility packages where somebody else worries about this, but these are people who I think would agree that CBT is a problem, but it's not that big of a problem for them that they're going to get involved in this, okay? Because they're going back, right? They all file, and this group definitely files U.S. taxes, okay?
Right.
No
Yeah.
question about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and great comment from Gabe right here. The biggest hurdle is explaining the issue to Americans in the U.S. and it'd be nice if we could do that better. Well, you know what? I think Gabe, what John's doing here is really, I think, a step to that because by dissecting the various differences, when someone says, "Well, hey, what's the big deal about expatriate taxation?" Well, you can kind of assume a few things when somebody says that. You could assume that their financial center of gravity is in the US. It's not a big deal. And it's true. If your financial center of gravity is in the US, and if you're working overseas as an expat for a large multinational, you're an employee, you're there for an assignment for 4 or 5 years, look, you're just visiting. It's an extended vacation. Your financials, you're not putting down your roots there. It's not a big deal. So I think this is John does a great job, great service by distinguishing the various types of personas and why we can't get, why some people's opinion on this maybe not, they need to just take an opportunity to be quiet, as it were.
Yeah. By the way, Anthony and Gabriel, there's a huge financial planning industry that has been built up around servicing these people. Creative planning used to be, is one example. Okay. Of more, and there will be more. Okay,
Yeah.
there's no question about it. But I mean, make no mistake about it. When we talk about opposition, make no mistake, citizenship taxation is a fantastic business for a lot of people. Okay, and they don't want it going anywhere.
Yeah.
Next, immigrants. Now, these are, these are people who are U.S. citizens. What distinguishes them is two things. The first is that they're living permanently outside the United States. They have it's just the way their life is. They're living permanently outside the United States. Their financial center of gravity is going to be outside the United States, right? In other words, their pensions, their whatever retirement planning. Now, here's one of the things about them, okay, and their asset and income streams are subject to very, very punitive U.S. taxation, right? Because it's foreign.
Oh yeah.
Here's another problem they have is they tend to not be dual citizens from birth. Okay, and for that reason, they really, I mean, if they're not thinking about renunciation, there's something wrong with their brains. Okay, and there may well be something wrong with their brains, but the point is that these are the people who are absolutely the worst affected by this. Things like the transition tax or the OVDP we talked about a few sessions ago. These destroyed their lives. Okay. They vary in terms of their level of tax compliance, Keith. They vary. Some are, some aren't, some weren't and became compliant, but they're sort of all over the place on this, right? But this is the group that is absolutely most harmed, right? They have the worst of all possible worlds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next group.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly touch on, John, on the third bullet point, tend not to be dual citizens from birth. And the reason why that's so important is that if you are a dual citizen from birth, you are exempt from the exit tax. So, there is 100% discrimination based on your national origin in the U.S. tax code because, well, the U.S. tax code is the true constitution of the United States.
Well, not only that, but the U.S. has citizenship taxation, but it also has citizenship non-taxation. Okay, once you're using citizenship as tax residency, but that's a good segue into the next group, accidentals. Let's talk.
All right. Yeah, you got it.
Now, this I find interesting. Okay, and what I'm about to give you is an extreme minority opinion, but it's minority only because people haven't thought about it and understood this. Okay. These are the chosen few. These are the chosen people. Why? Because they're U.S. citizens from birth. They have a right to a U.S. passport, but very few of them are in the U.S. tax system, and nobody is asking them to enter the U.S. tax system. These accidentals. They just sort of exist, and I'm sure they have banking problems, etc. But the fact that they're dual citizens from birth means they're not even incentivized to renounce because, they can be exempt from the exit tax. They have a right to a U.S. passport, right? And they're not in the U.S. tax system. I mean, how does it get better than that?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But yet somehow, I mean, I understand the banking problem, but yet somehow, they have marketed themselves as being the main victims of this, and they are not the main victims at all. I mean, everybody's hurt by this to some degree, but these are the people who are hurt by far the least. And
Aside, right, yeah. Aside from the banking issue, which also affects American immigrants too. So that's an issue that affects them as well. So they don't have it's like, yeah, but that's basically your issue because, and then John, and this is what I would say too. And we covered this, we covered this last time. There's a special program for accidental Americans.
Yeah, I mean that too. I mean, it's just.
I mean,
it goes on and on and on and on. These are the chosen people, right? They are the chosen people. It's the other people who, well, it's really the immigrants whose lives are being destroyed, right? In other words, people move from the United States, their financial center of gravity is out, and they're in the tax system, and they're not dual citizens from birth. There's no comparison. Okay. The accidentals are more like US nationals. Okay. You know, in the sense that they're entitled to a US passport, and that's worth something, obviously. Yeah. But there's no, I mean, technically they're supposed to be filing taxes, but they, you know, as Keith points out time and time, we know that they never have, and they probably won't, unless they want to renounce, you know, and use the relief procedures. So this is now, so this group, now what I want you to notice is that, you know, all of these groups have differing sort of incentives, right? You know, and things they have to do. Accidental Americans, it's mainly just being left alone, right? Which translates mostly into the bank account problems. I'm not minimizing that, okay? I mean, that is a problem, you know, more so for certain people than others, but it pales in comparison to the problem that immigrants have, which is the U.S. tax system is trying to confiscate all their assets, okay? I mean, you know, there really is no reasonable comparison.
You know, and I just would say one group that isn't mentioned here because we're really not talking about them as well. But I would not elevate them to the same terrible status of the U.S. immigrants is immigrants into the U.S. who have assets and income overseas. They are still, you know, I mean, again, a switch, and this is what I would distinguish is that a switch to residency-based taxation would not end their, you know, to residency-based taxation. Their worldwide income would still be taxable if they're in the U.S.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it wouldn't end their foreign asset reporting stuff.
Right. And also the onerous, horrible reporting and over reporting and over taxation. So they're a little different. They're not really covered in this group. They, you know, it really wouldn't help them. But and I think this is how successful the division is, right? That, you know, how successful the division is they're not even, you know, they're not even really part of the discussion because U.S. immigrants are usually, you know, in their group. And there's so many different groups, and there's not any coalescent group around. Just say, well, look, if we can't get rid of citizenship-based taxation, maybe we can get rid of this horrible, different, punitive, completely bizarre taxation of anything foreign. Maybe we could stop the penalty of having a foreign income or asset. And that issue is sort of, you know, that issue is not even, you know, brought up to a debate because I think it's great you had that slide from Bill Chomsky because that's not even part of the debate.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's a saying in politics: define or be defined, right? And, And by the way, we're seeing a very brief aside. We're seeing it playing out in the U.S. election right now. The Democrats still haven't said what they stand for.
Who knows? Well, and who knows? I mean, you don't. It's I don't even know what to comment on.
But that aside, okay. Yeah. So now, human nature being what it is, most people are interested in solving their problem. They're not interested in the broad principle. Okay, I mean, we know that, and that's what kind of pits these various groups against each other, right? Okay, and that's, you know, and you see, even though there's only one thing that solves the problem for everyone, right? The reality is, you see, the unwillingness of various people and groups to embrace the idea of severing citizenship from tax residency is some evidence they're not interested in the broad principle.
Yeah.
You know, they're just interested in, you know, in fixing stuff for a certain number of people. But anyway, that's just human nature. Next. Okay. Now, about these groups, you know, 10, 12 years ago, and I think that they were sort of in my view as well, maybe 10, 12 years ago. Well, not 10, maybe 12. Would have been a group that these various legacy organizations, existed with a significant purpose, to, help Americans abroad with these problems and solve these problems. And
Yes.
I think it includes that in various ways for various groups, but I think it's very important that remember that these are generally not single issue groups. They're concerned maybe with taxation, they're concerned with Social Security, they're concerned with, voting,
Voting and right,
a whole pile of
Medicare.
things. So it's a very so I mean, I'm not dumping on the groups at all. I'm just saying that it is a mistake for people on the ground suffering under this to imagine that the principal purpose of these groups is to solve that problem. Okay, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just sort of one thing that's there. And then the question becomes, well, how do they want to solve it? Now, I think where everybody is at one is they all, say, yeah, the tax system is horrible. It has to be changed. Everybody would minimally support some kinds of improvements, even if it means retaining citizenship as an indicator of tax residency. Although, for the record, I do not support anything that does not focus only on that goal. Okay, and I think it's a mistake. But the reality is, it's a mistake to not focus only on that goal. But, the reality is that, everybody has their idea of, what kinds of improvements would be good. And that, of course, depends on who they are, right? Again, what I find, and Keith mentioned this to me, what I find fascinating is, we've been talking for a long time about the importance of severing citizenship from tax residency. What I find interesting is how nobody will commit to that goal publicly, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
The only thing that will solve the problem for all people, all the time, under all circumstances, remove forever the tumor of citizenship taxation. No, they won't commit to that. Now, why? I'm not sure.
Well,
Which leads me to believe that it may be that Americans just can't conceive of a world where citizenship isn't tied to taxation. I mean, maybe they wouldn't recognize themselves. I don't know, but
again, I go back to your slide. I go back to the slide you had at the beginning, the quote from Noam Chomsky. I mean, there it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. So what you do is, you reduce the scope of the debate. But
right,
watching.
I think there's.
Go ahead,
there's another element I just want to add on to that is that not only will they not commit, but they will say how do I put this? They will say they support RBT, but what they're supporting is not residency-based taxation. That's even worse.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know what? It reminds me of watching Tim Walz's speech the other night. That's just so weird. But anyway,
I don't even know. All right. So and then this is, and I think John, this is why you have because this is always people ask, hey, because I get calls, people say, hey, the best time to renounce is now. And it's really, if you're that immigrant, right? That's really the person who's getting hammered the most. And I think if I hear your point, if I hear your point, John, it's basically, hey, take a look at the actual political landscape. Do you see a way that there's going to be a political will to fix it? Because these groups are so segregated. And so I think your point is like, you don't see a political solution to this problem. So you have to vote basically with your feet and look at renouncing, right?
Is that Americans abroad are dividing and conquering themselves.
Yeah.
There's no way to even go to the U.S. government, with any, and this is madness, right? Any unanimity on what's required here. And the immigrants are the ones who are the most exposed. They have the least, I would say, influence because they tend to not be members of DA or, because they just don't have a lot to do with the United States. They've suffered enough. I really am of the opinion that the time has come for this group to get out. Okay.
Right on. So you get to your point, because Americans abroad have divided and conquered. If it is something, right? Go ahead, Keith.
So, gentlemen, what do you say? There's another group of Americans overseas on various levels who say, hey, yes, I like the idea of severing U.S. citizenship from tax residency, but it's not going to fly. It's just not going to happen. So we're not going to ask for it. I hear that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's defeat. Right. Well, the powers that be don't want us to do it. So who are we to ask for it? Basically, right, Keith?
Correct.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what are we? Why should we have our say in the government? That's a little crazy. All right.
Now that's
Well, look, Keith, I'll answer that in very clear, blunt terms. That's the most stupid, idiotic thing I've ever heard in my life. I'll say it again.
There you go.
That is the most stupid, idiotic thing I've never heard in my life. The first point is this, and everybody who's had challenges in life or grew up playing sports and stuff like that knows the following. The moment you decide you can't do it, you can't do it. That's it.
There you go. Right.
What these people are really saying,
yeah.
they're saying we can't do it. And
Right.
that is, I mean, that is just so indescribably stupid. I mean, the point is to get the change, and if you're trying to get the change, you don't
ask for it.
You don't ask for it, right? You can't get the change if you're trying to get the change. I mean, it's madness. I think.
All right. Hey, I do have a heart. I have a. Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Go ahead. I just.
By the way, Keith, you're not very loud.
Yeah, you're very soft today, Keith.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just my connection. Can you hear me okay right now?
A little bit.
I have an idea. Okay? I think we can get some bumper stickers, okay, saying, I'm an American abroad. I can't do anything.
I don't have the power, right?
That would actually
I do have a hard stop at 8:30. I want to get to my part of the presentation right now, and because we're going to be talking about the survey, and for no reason at all, I want to talk about the Hatch Act. For no reason at all. Actually, there is a reason. And so I want to talk about the Hatch Act because
through the survey then, Anthony?
we're gonna go through the survey after I do this quick presentation on the Hatch Act, because this is what came to my mind as I was filling it out. This is the first thing that came to my mind as I was filling it out. The Hatch Act is officially known as the political activities of federal. Essentially, let's just get into it. The Hatch Act basically says you can't use your government position to politic for your government causes. Okay. And it's been around and it's used, people write about it all the time. Maybe they don't quite actually understand it. You have Hatch Act violations using your official authority or influence to affect the outcome of an election. Okay. Soliciting or receiving political contributions as part of your job. You're collecting a federal paycheck and you're soliciting and receiving political contributions. And maybe that's the one I'm really running for public office in a partisan election. That's not really relevant for this one. Engaging in political activity while on duty, wearing a official uniform or in a federal building. That might not be the one. And it doesn't restrict everything. But you're not allowed as a government employee to politic for a particular party or individual. You're just not allowed to do that. Now, it exempts the president and I believe also the vice president. And certain appointees, but generally federal employees are able to it applies to them. And I think, Keith, who's in charge of this as well, and it wasn't necessarily the president's. And so if you believe there's a Hatch Act complaint, you could go to the link here I put on my slide, and you can file a claim or mail it in there. And I think, and that is the scope of my Hatch Act presentation. And now I want to get to the survey. With that in mind, folks, why don't we take a look at the survey? Here we go. So we're going to go through it. John, is it okay if we use your email for this one, by the way? Because I already filled one out. Did you fill one out yet?
No, I don't intend to fill it out.
You don't? All right. So, all right. I'll have to use a different email address then. All right. All right, so we're going to go through it, and so I'm going to hit. So here it is. We're at the site. By the way, the link to the site I believe is in the description here below. So here it is. Americans living abroad. Here's your survey. Oh, a helpful survey. Oh, this is so wonderful, isn't it? All All right, let's go with, let's see, here's, okay, we have our first name. All right, I guess I'll put in my name. I'll have to put in my real name. I'll have to put in my company, organization. Well, I'm just as myself. Or no, I guess Irishmatic. Why don't we do that? Sure. All right. Oh, title, host. How about that? And then I'll use my Hotmail address for this one. So that we can tag to see what it is. Country of residence. Well, I guess I can't lie. I have to say I'm in the United States right now. And okay, now I'm filling it out. Okay, so here it is. Whoa. Okay, so I'm filling in my basic information. Keith, you see, this was my first. When I was going through this, like, whoa, this is the first thing that got me, right? What do you think about this field? Which U.S. state or territory is reflected on your identification, Keith? What do you think about that one?
I think I don't understand. That's bizarre because if you're an American overseas or an American immigrant overseas, you're not tied to an ID to a particular state.
Yeah.
Maybe some are, but a large swath of the population is not. They have a U.S. passport. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Well,
So
and this is what I find it interesting. You know what? Knowing what state because what that question is actually asking is, what state can you vote in? That's actually what that question is asking. So that was my first. Whoa! Why are we asking that question?
That would be a better question. Yeah.
Well, no, but what state you can vote for, because that's great for what? That's great for what? Follow-up emails. That's basically a tag. Hey, this is it. Hey, this person we're going to tag as they can vote in this state. Now, when there's an election or anything like that, they have your contact information. Say, hey, we need voters in Connecticut to come out. Otherwise, we're going to have this. So that right there was my first red flag when I saw that. So we're going to move on to the next ones. Okay. Now we get to, this is my second red flag. Why do we care about my issues? I'm an American overseas. That's my issue. Why do I care if a racial group? It's like, why is that? And really, that's after our name, email. It's okay. Where can you vote? And what's your racial group? Well, that's a fascinating question, completely irrelevant to my concerns. I guess I'll put other. I'll just put other. I'll just put other. See, I'll just put, hey, you know what? I'll do it to them. See explanation. There we go. All right. Now this is we go. Okay. Please let us know the primary reason you moved to your country of residence. Keith, what do you think about this question here? More affordable lifestyle, political reasons.
Again, it discounts a large swath of the American overseas population because there are Americans overseas who have never lived in the United States.
Well, and I would say, well, you always could put that, you could put that, other didn't move, not applicable, right?
Yeah.
Right. And you could do that, but it's like, wow, it's like, you know what? This really seems like it's a marketing. It's like you're trying to build a profile for a database. Sounds like, how do I identify this? Give all the demographics on this person. So, we can prioritize, how much this person would be willing to be interested in this cause or that cause.
Right. Well, I gotta put. I just on one point, Anthony. I just got to push back on one thing you said as far as building a profile for a database. That in and itself is not a bad thing if you're using this in the proper way to build a profile of Americans overseas vis-a-vis their issues, right? So that's not bad because surveys do build a profile for a database.
Right. But and I think you just said a word in there that didn't really come up. Issues.
What's that?
Right? Issues. Yes. Right. So, and as we're going through this, let us know where you see an issue. So far, we haven't come across an issue. This is just information on me. This is just, information on me, what I do. How long have you lived outside the U.S.? I mean, that would be, a good, that would be a good question for a survey. If there was more questions, I guess this one isn't really that bad. But it is helpful if you were. I mean, this would be a helpful question to have if you do intend to follow up with your database and to remarket to them. How likely are you? All right, let me just fill this one out here. I have less than a year. Well, see, I don't even have lived more than 20 years. How long will you move? How likely are you to move back to the United States permanently? Okay.
Again, move back. That's assuming that everyone that is overseas has lived in the United States.
So they have complete ignorance about who they actually are targeting this. They haven't even done their
Correct.
basic research on these people.
Okay, let me ask you this question, both of you. I gave you, I mean, they overlap, but I gave you 4 categories: retirees, abroad, expats, immigrants, accidentals. Which group do you think put the survey together?
I thought it was for retirees myself.
Really?
Yeah, I was looking at this is AARP.
Okay, which group clearly did not put
I
it
don't
together?
know.
Not
Immigrants. Immigrants.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
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 I mean, it's all focused on people who, had a life in the United States and then left.
Immigrants? Okay.
Keith, Keith, you're coming in and out there. All right. Well,
Okay.
all right. So, all right. Now, this is where this is okay. And the thing too is, you might, yeah. All right. My context of my incredulousness might not be apparent, but it will be very soon. So here it is: issues I'm following that affect Americans abroad. Okay. Taxation, I guess. All right. If selected other, it's a, can I select? Oh, I could select other. How about if I put in compliance too? Because that's an issue I'm following, because compliance and taxation are 2 different things.
Right.
Okay. Now, issues I'm following in the United States. Okay. What does this have to do with anything? What does this have to do with anything? And by the way, the AANHPI, I didn't know what it is. I had to look that up. That is Pacific Islanders, Alaska natives.
Right.
That's what that is.
You don't put abbreviations like that in something like this.
So that's the important thing. Like, so if you're doing that, and look at this: an African American, business, climate, and environment, COVID-19, criminal justice reform, disability, education, faith, health, immigration, labor, Latino. Okay, law enforcement. Oh, okay. This is an issue. LGBTQ. These are all the important issues. You see, it's like there's a whole dilution of you're here for tax and whatever. There's other things too. And
it's a dilution, but it has, with the exception of like tax, for example, it has nothing to do with the issues of Americans overseas. Right. These are homeland American issues. If you are interested in COVID-19 or women's issues, that's in your country of residence.
Yeah. Well, and the taxation really has nothing to do with, well, what does that mean? Are issues I'm following that affects Americans abroad? Well, taxation. Well, do you mean like domestic policy or just taxation in general? Right? It's not even specific. It's not even specific to their actual concerns. And so this is just, when I saw this, it's like, well, gun violence prevention. I mean, these are political causes. These are political causes in the United States that they're collecting information on. So, you put something in here. And so you got to wonder, well, when I do this, are they going to follow up to say, well, we know that you're concerned about, native, rural rights. I go with rural there. Wait a second. Guys, do you see where I'm at?
Yeah.
I'm at finish.
I know. I was shocked when I did it.
That's the point. This is it, folks. This is it. This is the entire survey. We're done here. I follow taxes in the United States. Hey, all right. You have all my information. Okay. Great.
So
I'm going to hit finish.
We're at the end. So what's the information that they collected then with this?
Right.
And how is it going to be used?
Right.
Going to be
there
used.
It is. And we're done. There it is. So now I got to ask. So, I mean, this looks incredibly obnoxious, and here's how you can file a Hatch Act complaint against the person who did this. Now, Keith, do you happen to know who created this? I think you do. Are you able to say?
I don't. No. I mean, I have an idea.
Okay.
But I have an idea, but that's it. I don't know definitively, so it would not be fair to say anything. But obviously, whomever put it together has zero clue on American overseas issues.
It's just and this is the problem, and this is what was pointed out by Kathy Moore on your Facebook page. That was really great. This survey is run. Site.com is a version of Salesforce. Salesforce is known as sort of the market leader in customer relation databases. This is what this is what online companies use. Now, Salesforce is probably the most expensive. A lot of complaints about its complexity, but it is the most expensive, likely most sophisticated CRM out there. In order to do what? The whole point is to collect leads, nurture them so that you can create sales. So the very platform that this survey is on is a commercial platform to use to nurture leads. And so now what I believe will be used for is, it does really appear to be that the list, and that the list doesn't necessarily need to come from the White House, but they have this data, and now they could just like, oh, here, we'll send it off to our friends. And now the Democrat National Committee has all of this information on you, and now they could target you with their constant, ads, and like, oh, hey, would you like to donate to, hey, look, we got to take care of Roe versus Wade, donate. And what did you get for yourself? You got absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
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 And now,
absolutely.
and I would say now to talk about surveys, and I think we talked about this before. There is a better survey out there. Seatnow.org has a new survey. You follow the links, tell the story here, and then the survey is actually here. This is where you can do it. And this is what a survey should do. This is the survey
for Americans overseas.
For Americans overseas. So this is the one you want to go to, and I'll put the link to the survey right in the super chat right now, folks. If you're on YouTube, you'll be able to get that here.
Yeah.
So here's
Laura
the link.
Snyder did a very good job.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And Melvin, thank you for the comments, Melvin. Yeah. It's not at all right. And Melvin, you don't think it's a Hatch Act violation? All right, maybe not, but I mean, it's maybe not yet, but it seems like a weird way to be asking questions, right? It's potentially could come up later. So
now I'm going to make a statement, because I've heard this, is that, well, maybe it's not a perfect survey, but at least they're engaging with Americans overseas. I've heard that stated. Well, I don't agree, because it's the way they're engaging.
Well, right. Well, someone mugging you is engaging, right? That's what we're going to call as a success. Is, well, they engaged with me. Wow, you got attention. Well,
the problem is this, right? I mean, I'm sure that from their perspective, they are engaging, and I'm sure from the perspective of whoever put the survey together, it's intended to engage, right? But the problem is that they are engaging from the perspective of what they think is out there, okay, and what the issues are, etc. And they clearly are clueless, perhaps would be a good word.
Yeah.
How all these issues affect people on sort of the retail level, meaning everyday people trying to make a living and feed their families and this.
Yeah, right. Stuff, right. All right. Well, I want to wrap up this section. We got to go, but so next time, John, we're going to talk about treaty tiebreakers.
Americans can use treaty tiebreakers sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe we close today's session with throw out a question. I mean, why should an American citizen ever be taxed by another country? I mean, isn't there something philosophically fundamentally wrong and immoral about that? What do you think, Anthony?
Why do other countries exist? Why? If you're an American, look, you're American. There's really not other countries. There's something to fill up. They create a lot of flags. It makes things look festive, right? A lot of those flags right now allows you to have an Olympics, but really, America.
For you, maybe you put this up on your group. Do you think that the real problem is not U.S. citizenship taxation, but the fact that other countries tax Americans? Do you think, Keith, maybe that's the real issue here?
How dare they?
That instead of trying to get rid of citizenship taxation, people in France should be going a little further, expand on the already generous benefits of the U.S.-France tax treaty and say, why should an American be taxed in France at all? What do you think, Keith?
Yeah, it's terrible that they are. They should only be focused on being taxed in the United States.
The only one,
because
the
they're-
one.
Right.
Don't you think that that's the real problem here? That everybody's misconstrued the problem. It's not the U.S. tax system. It's the fact
It's the
that
other countries.
Americans. Isn't that the real problem?
How dare they?
It could be.
Oh, all right. Well, yeah. So next time we're going to be doing we'll be doing using treaty tiebreakers to
Well,
create.
and treat in a way that most people don't talk about them.
And
But
how's that? What's the specific way we're going to be talking about it?
oh, it's fascinating stuff. But I mean, I think that to use that, you have to first. I mean, you have to ask the reasonable question. You say, "I'm American. No other country should be able to tax me, right?"
No other country should be able to tax you. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up today. So we're going to see you next time, folks. I do want to say, and I think you might understand why John says, hey, all roads lead to renunciation for a certain person. That's really the point. And so if you are thinking of renouncing, you reach out to John at citizenshipsolutions@protonmail.com. And if you are having a tax issue, you're looking to come into compliance, maybe use the voluntary disclosure programs. We talked about those extensively. You can reach out to us, my firm. I'm at thew and Partners, but you can still reach us at irismedic.com/offshore. Schedule a time to talk to us. We can help you through your situation. And lastly, I just want to give a shout out to Keith. He had to hop off, but he helps out a lot of folks just sort of brace themselves for everything that's coming. People aren't ready to necessarily to reach out to a tax professional or a professional like John or I. Keith is not a tax professional. He just is grounded in reality. Reach out to him if you have questions about what you should do in your specific situations. His email is us_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. All right. Well, with that, there we go. We are ready to go, and I would say thank you so much, John, for your slides today. And any parting words of advice for us?
All roads lead to renunciation.
There we go. All right. For certain American immigrants, that might be true for you.
Certainly for immigrants.
Yeah.
Certainly for immigrants. Yeah.
All right, great. All right. Thanks again for everyone for watching. See you next time.